I was cast into the role of cisgender woman when I was born. The hope for me was to become a successful wife and mother with a minor career that could never outshine my husband's work. And so begins the task of raising a promising young woman, learning nurturing through childcare the moment I could balance a baby on my hip at 7, learning how to cook and clean, the works. In church, we learned our place. Be meek and quiet, let men lead. If you chose the work of the Lord, let it be one of service, not of adventure. You were designed for it, but these weren't the things that made my skin itch. I developed a rash every time I thought about how I was supposed to act in the wake of the male gaze. It was the expectation of being attractive enough to be picked so that a man could validate my femininity that made me worry. It was the expectation of having any sexual activity or abuse diminishing my value. It was knowing that there was nothing I could do to protect my value. It would either ever decline as I grew older, because men don't like yet older women, or it would stay stagnant. I would be only known in proximity to the people around me as a wife, as a mother, as a church mom, whatever. It was through a combination of church, pickup artists, MGTOW, and my own interactions that a woman cannot be truly a woman if she is not attractive with a male partner or young. If she's not young, she's got to have at least a couple of kids and prioritize their well-being over her career. I identify as a woman, but I almost didn't want to. I didn't feel feminine enough to take on that role. I am fat, and I am trying to work on it. That is not something that I intend to be for the rest of my life. I am quote-unquote average at best, even if in my mind I could imagine myself to be an 8. And the idea of the highest of my femininity being distilled to my fuckability and the potential for me to have children terrifies me. I could never earn my femininity in the same ways that men could earn their masculinity. The more education, the higher my salary, the more people I led, the more likely my gender identity would be minimized and narrowed until I was nothing more than a masculized woman. But being a real woman was no better. My value was either static or constantly decreasing, depending on whether or not I had a man in my life. In going to a historically women's college, my fears were exacerbated. The women around me got their rewards. Those who were highly desired or attractive were in relationships or committed in lives of service. People who didn't fill the gender description for a woman chose other identities. Here I was trying to manage the minuscule value I had, being a virginal Christian girl and trying to actively starve the other more masculine talents that I already developed. At best, I hoped that I'd be wiped up by the age of 25 or be in a coven. But then I watched RuPaul's Drag Race. I didn't start with the best season 6, don't ask at me. But suffice to say, it changed my life. RuPaul's Drag Race led me to love the act of femininity. Men, gender fluid humans, and trans women reveled in the act of becoming beautiful and performing an act that could later be peeled off and washed away. They were funny and ecstatic. They were passionate about their careers. They were vulnerable and nurturing. They were poised and intimidating. But they were also shady as fuck and uncultured. They were sometimes silly and sometimes embarrassing to watch. But I was so invested because I could see that they were people. When I could reconcile that these actors were people and that in exchange, women were also people, I could feel free to be completely feminine and play the role my way. This seems like such a basic realization, but it really was revolutionary to me, and all it took was a dozen or so gay men practicing radical self-acceptance. In this video, I'm going to be talking about the concept of femininity, what makes it toxic, and why femininity is great. Idealized femininity lies in the male gaze, and she is gorgeous, inside and out, especially outside, nurturing to everyone, especially her and her man's children, down to fuck, but only him, can cook and clean meals for the family. Did I mention she's hot, attractive? Otherwise, she's invisible, but she's okay with it. Even the pretty woman is pretty quiet, unless she's singing. Speaking of, I don't think I actually know the speaking voice of any of the church woman leaders growing up. It's almost as if they only came to be blessed by their husband and to start singing for our entertainment, which is kind of creepy now that I say it like that. Her personality is a mystery, covered in the soothing pleasantries of "how was your day?" and "let me know what you need." Her femininity cannot be shared. It is a guiding light to other women modeled after her. It must be shown with limited admission. She is beautiful, she is meek, she is nurturing. Her femininity is designed for others. In comparison, there is rising discussion of toxic femininity. I shouldn't be laughing at this because I do realize that it is a term that is gaining traction, especially in conservative, alt-right, male-centered spaces about the feminine traits, stereotypical feminine traits that do actually lead to harm. But sometimes it's just, this term only comes up when people are discussing toxic masculinity. And that's because toxic femininity has a few major archetypes that obviously we'll be talking about: the patriarchy and toxic masculine roles. These archetypes are the feminist, the fat woman, the trans woman, or the queer woman. Her sexuality is on full display everywhere she goes. She's unattractive, unkept, or simply disgusting. She has no talent out of shouting and demanding her rights. She's combative and dismissive of the needs of the people around her. She demands that other people conform to her lifestyle or be painted as bigoted. She is brash, she is crude, she is self-serving. Her femininity is a weapon. I hated both of these archetypes. I hated femininity because it was presented as passive or dangerous, while ideal femininity is beautiful. To attain its full potential is lottery. Your natural looks, and whether or not a man chose you. You could then give yourself completely to one and only one person and live out your life as an accessory to his. The toxic feminine is free, but coarse, irritating, and downright abusive. Femininity could never be a facet of personality. It had to be the whole package or you were damaged goods. What is femininity outside of the constant show of submission and overwrought emotionality? Femininity is a beautiful role, but that's just it. It's a role. Women are people, and many of them practice a good balance between femininity in their everyday lives in such a way that it doesn't consume them. Feminine strength, the ability to love and care in the wake of a cruel universe, is amazing. The women I've met in pediatric oncology departments are the strongest people. The boldness and sass so hated in feminist and queer women brings dignity for the fights that they start. Ya Santua, Queen Mother of the Ashantis, once said, "If you will not fight, I will fight for you." And that still sticks in my mind to this day. I know I butchered the quote, but her strength continues to give dignity to the memory of the fights that Ghanaian people had. In addition to other great women and their strength, Coretta Scott King held that down. I think that sometimes we minimize the roles that wives play in their husbands' lives, especially when those husbands have dangerous jobs. But she was getting threats from the FBI. Her husband was constantly in jail. She was managing the house and an activist on her own right. That woman deserves her flowers. And Marsha P. Johnson started a riot that led to the gay civil rights movement of the 20th century. And she's pretty damn iconic. And she's just as much of a woman, even if as a trans woman, as I am. The ideal feminine in my mind is nurturing, carefree, and unafraid of leadership. for the sake of herself and the people around her. She is not minuscule. She is not a shrinking violet. She's not overwrought with her own emotionality and what she can and can't do in her life. In addition to being selfless, she constantly earns her position in the lives around her. I think that the biggest issue that I had with the presentation that femininity has historically had is that it can never be earned. It can only ever be maintained. And what happens if I don't want to maintain it? What happens if I want to be able to change and grow? What happens if I'm 30 and I don't have a husband? What happens if I'm 50 and I don't have children? What happens if I don't want to be in the streets holding up signboards, protesting? Does that mean that I don't have the right to just simply be a person? Irving Goffman would argue never. Goffman wrote The Presentation of Self in Everyday Life in 1959. He made waves in the sociology community by describing the concept of the self as a social construct. There is no self, only a collection of roles played in different situations. He went as far to allude to Shakespeare in this quote, "All the world's a stage, all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts." He is the basic girl sociologist. He argued that gender was mostly socially constructed, and that women are socialized to present themselves as precious, ornamental, and fragile, uninstructed, and ill-suited for anything requiring muscular exertion, and to project shyness, reserve, and display of frailty, fear, and incompetence. One of the examples that he gave in his everyday self was when a girl got called by her suitor while at school and made sure to wait for it to ring for a couple of minutes to alert the other girls in the room that she did have suitors calling. Candace West and Don Zimmerman added to this thesis in their 1976 paper, Doing Gender, about the evolution of sex category, and gender. Gender is a socialized act that is routine, methodical, and reoccurring. Doing gender involves a complex, socially guided, perceptual, interactual, and micro-political activity that casts particular pursuits as expressions of masculine and feminine natures. When we view gender as an accomplishment, as an achieved property of situational conduct, our attention shifts from matters internal to the individual and focuses on interactional and ultimately institutional. So if gender roles are only an act, why should I defend the concept of femininity? Femininity is seen as the opposite of masculinity. And masculinity, whether perceived as healthy or toxic, is described as the pinnacle of existence. You can see this in the fact that in monotheistic religions, more often than not, the God is presented as he. In my Christian faith, they keep saying it's he, even though he contains both male and female traits, because it is considered that all of the power, that main character energy, is reserved for the masculine. It is not good to simply be nurturing, sassy, soothing, or loyal to a partner. Masculinity says, I need no one to serve. I only need to protect, but on my terms. Rugged individualism and stoic leadership have their place, but these noble traits at times are played to diminish the feminine opposites in society. The mother hen, the submissive partner. Without one, the other will die. Minimizing womanhood and femininity as accessories or nuances leads to a damaging societal expectation that women are disposable. And this has catastrophic consequences. I mean, at this point in time, there's a woman shortage in China and India, both major patriarchal societies that prioritize the needs of the men in the society over the needs of the women in the society. To the tune of, I think now it's like the population is both aging and the women are no longer getting married, and when they do get married they don't want to have as many kids as before, and I don't blame them. You vilified their position, and it was a femicide for about a generation. I'm not certain why you would have the expectation that women would just forget about that. Masculinity is powerful, but it is not better than femininity. Women are powerful, and so is their femininity. It is a role that should be loved. It is a role that should be respected. And I am excited to take on this role for the rest of my life. Thank you for watching. I've been ranting and raving for the past couple of minutes, so give me some feedback. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Leave a comment, like or dislike, subscribe. More of my ranting lunacy is on its way. Thank you so much.